Hello, everybody. We are back. It is time for Truth or Skepticism. Mr. Radigan, how are you? It's 1 p.m. Central Time. God knows where you are, but it's 1 p.m. Central Time.
7 p.m. at Milan time.
7 p.m. Milan time. Only 6 hours difference. Beautiful.
I think it's 7 hours difference. It's 8 p.m. here, actually.
8 p.m. There you go.
Yeah. But it's still light out here.
So,
Did you see the Elon Musk interview?
I did not see the Elon Musk interview. I was told by one of our viewers this morning, or by two of our viewers, that I should watch it, but I have a hard time watching Elon Musk. For something about the way he talks really bothers me.
So I interviewed him.
You did?
So the same time that I interviewed Mark Zuckerberg by accident,
yeah,
I interviewed Elon Musk by accident.
Oh, you have to tell that story then. I need to know.
And this was, they must have been right around the PayPal IPO. They must have been the first time he came out to like talk to financial press.
Yeah. I mean, there's something wrong with him. I don't exactly know what it is, but you know,
I completely agree, right? I mean, I had that interaction
yeah.
prior. And then obviously I've seen a lot of some versions of the same things you have.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought up the interview, is because for me, it was striking how apparently normal he was behaving. And I agreed with the basic context of his analysis.
I didn't hear one word about it. I didn't hear one word about it, so I have no idea.
I'm going to tell you what resonated with me, and then we can move past him. But there was something in what he said.
Okay, sure.
That is the same thing that Tom Sosnoff would say. But I think it's a deeper issue about team building and enterprise and entrepreneurialism.
Okay.
And then how much structure is destiny. That there's if you have good education, if you have good culture, then you can have great teams to be very productive and make things. And if you don't have good culture, you won't. And his comment was, I would almost rather take somebody, the interviewer was asking him, you voted for Biden last time, would you vote for Biden a second time?
Okay.
And he was, saying, he was demurring in a way that it was apparent that he doesn't like Biden, right?
Okay.
And he's like, but they're trying to press him, well, would you vote for Trump? And it's like the worst decision in the history of mankind. And so he does what every human do, which just laughs and says, can we have someone else, please?
Sure.
Right? Which is like 9 out of 10 Americans, I would imagine.
Sure. I would imagine it's if it's not 9 out of 10, it's 8 out of 10. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big number that's,
I mean, there's a few people that like Trump, and then there's a lot of people that hate Trump and would vote for dirt over him. So, I mean, that's where America's at right now, which is really sad.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he said, I would almost rather pick a group from a phone book.
Random.
Like just go up to get monkey, find a phone book, and make whoever the monkey points to the president of the United States of America. And my bet is that it would be a better chief executive in terms of budget and vendor process and lack of corruption and like resolution of domestic and foreign non-moral, just procedural issues.
I completely agree. I would go blind out of the phone book. For sure.
That's why I bring it up, though, because I'm a student of yours and I'm an observer of his, and I recognize all the sort of peripheral distractions that come with Elon Musk, and to a certain degree even with you. But at the end of the day, he was expressing something that just felt universally true, which is, can I have somebody else? And if I have my choice is Biden, Trump, or a monkey in a phone book, I'll vote for the monkey in the phone book.
Yeah, I mean, I've said the same thing about money managers. Like, if you said to me, would you take, Warren Buffett or whatever, Bill Ackman and
Leon
Cooperman or whatever, you pick anybody you want, or somebody basically Paul Tudor Jones, I don't care what it is, or throw a dart and pick somebody out of a crowd at a tasty event. I would much rather have somebody out of a crowd at a tasty event manage my money than any of those guys. No question about it.
So anyway, I'm kind of, because I have a destination. I'm prosecuting a thesis today.
Okay. All right, I'm listening.
About entrepreneurialism, actually.
Okay, I'm listening. Yeah.
So that's why that's true.
Okay.
At the same time, and he made this very clear, and you make this very clear all the time, there are lots of very great examples of just good executive function as chief executives of entities. And there's chief executives who grow and who are visionary, which you talked about at length. And there's chief executives that are operators and that manage and optimize and, streamline and, scale and whatever.
Yeah.
And without even dropping into a debate of whoever the best manager or the best innovator may be, it's obvious in America that there's so many great executives, both in the management operation side and on the innovator side across a spectrum of industries. I won't list them, but there's stuff the private sector is laden with great executives and project managers, and ultimately what I would say are team builders, right? A great executive's job is to allocate time, budgets, and teams. The U.S. government is a giant budget with teams, committees, right? Where you and I are on the Justice Committee, or you and I are on the Tax Committee, or you and I are on the Ag Committee. It's a corporate team. Not that it's the same. It's not that North Star may not be the same thing, which is to make money or to sell product. The North Star of the team might be, number of people fed, or the amount of people with health coverage, or like different values. I understand, but it's the same executive management process.
Okay. I'm with you.
They will say that the government needs to be run like a business. They mistake it as one that needs to be run for economics, as opposed to adopting best practices of executive structure. Our government is the exact opposite of that team building, entrepreneurial executive structure. You agree?
Yeah.
So the private sector just moves past the whole thing. Instead of stopping on the government and trying to reform it, the private sector moves to its own pace. That's why the short-term interest rates are set by the short-term markets. It's why all the things that we talk about are happening. And I'm curious the degree to which you feel there are certain parts of the economy, like fintech, or like where the ability to bypass a dysfunctional government is more obvious. In other words, if you were to drop to the bottom of the Musk or the Sosnoff rabbit hole, and what amounts to an intractable policy structure or competency issue, and so the key is to exist in a world that is where that's irrelevant, or where they follow you.
Is that the question? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question is, where is that? Like for me, it's obviously, because like they're trying to run it on fintech, but then there's fights against crypto, or they want to run it on health insurance, but there's a regulatory. In other words, where is the place where the private sector is most empowered?
It's probably not a place. It's about objectivity, and it's about it's probably more about not having a bias than it is against anything else. You see, I think like you're not necessarily going to get somebody that's, from the public that's necessarily smarter, but you're going to get somebody that's more objective, that doesn't have the biases. When you think about, how did Trump get elected the first time? That was his, that was his calling card. That was his story. I'm not one of them. And, but he turned out he was one of them. He was one of the worst of one of them, but he's not one of them was his whole story. That's how he won. And Hillary Clinton was one of them, no question about it. And I think that, if you took somebody off the street, or you pick somebody random out of whatever pool you would pick somebody that potentially is objective, and therefore that's why it works. It's the same reason why you pick somebody to manage money, or pick an underlying stock, like a monkey to pick a stock, or or a cat or something. It's because they're completely objective. They don't. Whatever the factors are, they're not the same. They don't have any of these biases that are already built in that they can't get around. I think that's the most important thing. I don't think it's a sector or a part of policy. I just don't see that.
So you would argue that basically that it could manifest anywhere in the economy at any time if you had the right perspective.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Within, some limits, obviously, with maybe defense or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, but that's, what a good manager does is, I mean, that's the problem with really bad managers is that you get people that are in that position that say, I know more than everybody else, when that's idiotic because they don't. That's what would drive people crazy in the executive branches when somebody like Trump would say, I know more than the generals know. Like, that's the kind of thing it's so just absurdly ridiculous that, that it would drive, and you can't blame anybody for not wanting to deal with that, because that's why you have experts. I know more about biotechnology than anybody. I know more about diseases. It's insanity.
Markets.
Yeah, a financial market. It's insanity. But a good manager says, I hire really smart people that know more about this than anybody else. Greatness is an accumulation of lots of great talent. I'm not going to say that organizations win championships, but in a sense, when you think about, most sports are team sports. And when you think about it, it really is a combination of lots of different, specialists, people that are specialists at their specific positions that create, greatness. There's superstars that rise above, but it's the same thing in politics and everything else. You need to have great people in running your military, running different parts of your, running different parts of government, whether it's judicial, whether it's legislative, whether it's military, whether it's treasury, whatever it is. They have to understand the space. You need people with know-how, and great CEOs do the same exact thing. They recognize, hey, there are really smart people out there that understand different parts of this business. That's why you hire a CFO, because they understand the financial part of the business. That's why you hire a CTO, because they understand the technical part of the business. I don't think they're better CEOs. Just because you have a brilliant CTO does not make him the potential, or her, the potentially a better CEO. But to make a great CEO, you have to at least, appreciate the fact that there's people out there that know more about technology than you know.
I mean, it almost sounds like you're suggesting that team building skills and the ability to recruit and be smart enough to identify, recruit, and win the trust of people with that level of expertise and talent to work with you, it may be the primary factor. Like that trumps almost all adversity, up to a point, I'm sure, but that it's a very determinative piece of the entire outcome is the ability to make a team. In other words, Elon Musk didn't make a spaceship was going to land and touch with a laser beam on someone in outer space. He managed to have the hiring of people who organize teams to build projects, to test processes, to move that.
Of course, Elon Musk had a vision that he's going to put people on Mars, or he's going to do, and he hired the smartest people in the world he could find to execute that vision. It's no different than if I'm a CEO here and I want to build an amazing company, and I want to build amazing technology. I'm going to go find the best damn technologists I can find. And if we're going to build, something else, we're going to find the best damn person that we think fits that role. And I mean, how else do you do something? That's how that is a free market.
Which is antithetical to the way America's CEO, the presidency is run without any of that.
Well, with bad presidents. I mean, listen, there needs to be even in a flat democracy, there needs to be a final decision maker. That's the whole reason that you run for president, because you get the last say, right? No matter how flat your democracy is, and in a perfect world, your democracy is very flat. But no matter how flat it is, somebody needs to have the tie. Somebody needs the vote to offset the ties, and that's why you run for president. But really bad presidents, like really dumb, bad presidents, they think they know everything. And really smart presidents understand, that, hey, we don't know everything, and therefore we try to hire smart people and put them in those positions so that we just have to either sign off or break the tie type thing. That's how, that's real brilliance.
Why do you think the private sector is so good at producing talent like that? Because I feel like
because it's a system where if you fail, you pay the price, and if you're successful, you get paid. That's what capitalism is. That is a true free market.
And you think that breeds basically the best education and best problem-solving systems, logically?
Well, it breeds the best innovation. I mean, you have to remember that there's a very thin line. There's lots of gray areas, and there's a very thin line between innovation, brilliance, and failure. You can be absolutely brilliant, you can innovate, and you can fail because the mechanism you put in place didn't work, and it didn't make
wrong weekend for the movie.
Didn't make any money. Everything you did was friggin' brilliant, but the whole thing, there's no economic model behind it. So the brilliance of this is that everything falls into place with a model that creates some form of free cash flow or some form of value. And that's the real challenge.
And I just feel like there's literally multiple classes of people in in America, and really in the world, not in America. I don't even mean it in the economic sense, in terms of haves and have-nots, but more in the sense of people that are actually really well educated and smart, and either in support of the executive type culture you're talking about, or part of it, or some relation in service of it, something. And then that stands in a really stark contrast with the problem solving of any government, not just the American government. I mean, of all government. And I wonder if that is is that an indictment of, like, is democracy by definition always going to have weaker leadership systems? Because there's never going to be a true executive authority.
Well, I mean, it's designed that way because there was a, remember where democracy kind of comes from. And there was a time when wealth was very evenly distributed. So if you were essentially running the democracy, you were essentially as wealthy or as successful as whoever ran the largest industry or whoever had the most money, unless it was some, passed down through royalty or something like that. So there was always that. It was relatively flat. But over the last couple of centuries, what's happened is that there's a disparity now between, Elon Musk could not become the richest person in the world if he was the greatest president. And so the markets have moved, and there's a disconnect now. There's a disconnect between who runs your democracy and who runs your most successful companies. There's always been an argument there's a really good argument, I think, for, why do we pay LeBron James $50 million a year to play basketball? I mean, he makes $200 million or $300 million a year with all his endorsements, but why do we pay him $50 million a year to play basketball? Why do we pay a lot of people $50 million a year to basketball? Or why do we pay Howard Stern $100 million a year to talk on, Sirius radio? And the answer is because that's what in a true free marketplace, that's what they're worth. But then why do we pay a president $400,000? Because when they done with their presidency, they can go speak for, $1 million speaking time. That's ridiculous. What we should do is we should essentially have, create a model where the president of the United States, because this is the most powerful nation in the world and the biggest economic power in the world, where the presidency, okay, well, if you're somebody playing basketball in the NBA, is getting paid $35 million, well, they should at least get $50 million a year. Then you're going to get a whole different crowd at $50 million.
And I imagine that, I love this idea, and I hate to be so agreeable, because imagine the savings and the collapse of corruption and inefficiency.
Of course.
Trillions, hundreds of billions would come out.
Because who else can afford to run for president, basically? Because not that you need your own capital anymore. But at some point, you have to be at that point in your life where you're willing to basically say, hey, if this doesn't work, I don't care. I'm done. I'm going to go play golf. Like, I mean, it's not a, you can't stair step. You're not building a career out of running for president. But if we put a price tag up there, let's just say $50 million. I know it doesn't, I know the optics don't look great, but when you compare it to what actors and movie stars and athletes get and everything else, and corporate CEOs, the corporate CEOs that get 35,
or whatever,
and tie it in, listen, and really make it interesting. Say, listen, if the economy grows by X, you get this. You know what? Your base salary is 25 million. If you grow the economy by 3%, you get 50 million, whatever it is, and make it so that you have 50, 35-year-olds, 50, 40-year-olds, 50, 50-year-olds, everybody signing up to run. We have 500 candidates for president because all of a sudden we've created an economic incentive, and you're not going to have any more 76-year-old, basically, I mean, I'm not even going to use the word, but, you're not going to have a bunch of...
I can't call them poor candidates.
Poor candidates, fine. Leave it there.
We will have fewer poor candidates.
You'll have no poor candidates because you're going to have a real competitive marketplace. This is not that hard. We're a country that has a GDP of freaking, what is it now? 15 trillion or something like that. Whatever the stupid numbers, it's probably 50 trillion for all I know, basically. And we're worrying about, $25 million for president. I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous.
I'm stopping it with this conversation right here. I'll move to another topic now happily.
Okay.
Because I feel very satisfied. I hope the audience feels satisfied.
Okay.
Because one, we've linked Elon and Tom, and two, we've created a fantastical solution that will never happen, but I completely agree with it. And my point is, I wonder if weird people as they get older become more normal. Like, I wonder if Elon Musk is becoming more normal as he ages.
I would say, yeah, probably.
Weird, like floor trader friends of yours who, as they age, became more normal. Trying to think of my own history.
Probably not. Like most floor traders have, floor traders was not the assembly of the greatest minds ever. That's not how that business worked. It wasn't, the combined IQ was not, was a fraction of the combined IQ.
But there's still some odd personalities.
Well, there's really strong personalities, and in their own little world, they had their own sense of brilliance. Very few people could do that, but it wasn't, probably not the people you want running the country.
You're going to go back to the search for America. They could do America CEO boy, what's what's the singing one? The Voice.
America's Got Talent or something.
Yeah. Where you just run 50 million. The winner of this television show will be the president of the United States of America.
Not the craziest thing in the world. Would probably work for me.
I think people would love it.
Well, American Idol, instead of American Idol, we'll just call it American President.
American Idol, that was it. American President.
Yeah, American President. Yeah, sure. I mean, you can't do worse. Like you couldn't find two worse candidates. Like you would have to really work hard to find.
If you hired me and said, Radigan, go find me the two worst candidates, I wouldn't do this bad.
Right. You couldn't.
No matter how hard I tried.
Right. That's actually the most brilliant idea we've ever had on this podcast. America's, the American president instead of
American president.
Yeah.
American president.
Yeah. And it's just a show where we pick the president. And it's a long process. And we have a whole bunch of judges. And
yeah. When you run 18 months of filters and interviews and submissions and on layers, it'll go on forever.
Yeah. We'll hold tryouts in every city, and then people will go, yes, I got to the next round, and then eventually we're going to end up with a president that's
regional, and you go to the state championship, and then the state champions will come.
And I bet you we end up with somebody that's probably pretty damn good.
I bet you get a great president out of that deal.
It's the greatest idea ever. In fact,
20 good president choices.
In fact, I'm doing this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I don't know how we're going to sell this idea.
It's impossible. Why this idea? I watched a group years ago when I was first into election reform about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was a group that had the idea to do some sort of a game effect, like some game. And the point is you have to make a deal with the Federal Election Commission that basically registers the votes of your viewers as being legally ratified by the FEC. Then the barrier to this magical idea is a legal budget.
Ah, got it.
To deal with the FEC, to be like, if we deliver this level of performance, and then you're going to take that meeting and you're going to be like, never mind.
Okay. Well, it was a great idea while it lasted.
The lawyers will ruin anything.
They always do.
Now, because the second layer, just even with the Musk and from this conversation is, I believe the thing that most distinguishes the United States really from the rest of the world is the sovereignty and depth of the private capital market away from the government. Whereas like the sovereign wealth fund in Norway, the obvious ones become things like Saudi Arabia or Russia, where the government controls the most money. As they control the money, they call the government and private sector money, whereas private sector money moves more freely in the United States, at least in a way that is less directly controlled by the government. If anything, the private sector money controls the government in many instances. But I also feel like that allows the United States to uniquely adapt. That the United States, because of that capital structure, is more adaptable. And actually, I guess I'm expressing some American optimism, because I think the flexibility of the American structure, despite as frustrating as our terrible presidential candidates are, the American cultural and financial system, I think, is best equipped to, it's like water around a rock.
Okay.
And so at the very least, I have a little bit of optimism, despite the old man on both sides. I
agree with you.
In terms of your optimism.
Yeah.
Do you think that the recent regional bank failures are good for the fintechs, by the way? Like, has it been good for in terms of asset migration toward the new technology companies? I'm just thinking about the transition from old to new, which is going to keep happening everywhere.
I believe it hasn't been bad for us. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't say it's been good for us, because I would say that I wouldn't say it's been good for us. I don't think it's been good. But it hasn't hurt us. I would say that the negative side to it is that Gensler, rather than taking the blame rather than putting the blame where it needed to be put, which was on the incompetence of the leadership of these banks. I mean, absolutely, and I talked about this a little bit this morning. Elizabeth Warren kind of nailed it when she ripped on these bank CEOs, the last couple of days in congressional hearings, basically, ripping them apart because of their incompetence. And Gensler, on the other hand, decided to blame crypto, which is his argument was, I think he came out, I think it was yesterday, and he said something to the effect of, and I'm just paraphrasing, but that 3 of the 4 bank failures could be tied back to crypto positions, to, one to kind of like a stable coin, and 2 to underlying, crypto financing or whatever you want to say. So Gensler tried to put the blame on crypto, on decentralization, which to me is idiotic. And the real blame is on the incompetence of the CEOs of those companies, and just, sheer incompetence. That's all it was. And so,
concerned that we're starting to see a real ardent anti-crypto regime from the Biden administration?
I don't think we're seeing it from the Biden administration. I think we're seeing it from Gensler. And I think that, you can have a good administration with a bad choice. They made a bad choice. He's a bad person. And in every administration, for everybody, no matter who the president is, listen, they make bad choices. You're under the gun. You've got to choose some people. It's very hard to get rid of people, because sometimes these roles, who the hell wants to be head of the SEC? It's a thankless job. But I think that, you got to be careful. It's probably not like he's a smart person. It's just that, he's got a little bit of a complex or whatever. He's on a mission or something. I don't know what it is, but whatever, it's misguided. His anger is misguided.
And do you think it's an actual risk to the structure and development of crypto in the United States?
I do not. I think long term it will probably benefit. It will benefit all that because he will create he has basically killed the flow of new capital into the decentralized space. So if you were a crypto firm and you tried to raise money right now, you couldn't raise a penny. So I think that he's killed innovation in the very short term, and he's consolidated the business, which ultimately, killing innovation is bad, but consolidating the business is probably not a horrible thing. They've weeded out some of the criminals just on the basis of not being able to raise money. And so I shouldn't say criminal, but some of the bad actors. Because of that, ultimately, I think the industry will come back stronger.
So you're arguing that Gensler's a short-term problem, basically.
He's a short-term problem for fintech. And you asked the question, how has fintech reacted to bank failures? And I think that
and whether it's good for customer acquisition for people to leave because of the stickiness issue for people to just leave institutions. They're like,
I think it's more of a problem for banks than it is for brokerage firms, because brokerage firms, the nature of brokerage firms is they're highly regulated. They don't take overnight risk with customer capital. The only firm that got in trouble was Schwab because they're a bank, but no other brokerage firm got any trouble because there's just no such thing as.
So that's why I was wondering if it was good for your business. As people they lose confidence in the legacy, and they're like, you know what? If we're going to have risk over here, we might as well be over there where we know.
It doesn't. I don't think that people think about that, with their trading accounts that much. People more like their software than they care about the firm. I think the firm's pretty irrelevant in many cases. I mean, with Tasty, I think it's relevant because we do things other firms don't do. But I think the rest of the industry, you get used to some piece of software and you're like, okay, it's easier to use this than it is to change. Even though I don't agree with it, I think that's the case.
You don't agree with the stickiness. You're saying just from the habituation of a given customer.
Yeah. But I mean, I've stayed with certain things longer than I should have, just given the stickiness of the situation.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, does the recent bank extravaganza make people less sticky? Like, are people more willing to do it? They're like, screw it, I'm going to move my things because I don't want to deal. Or are they less, or it doesn't matter because human nature is always going to have a stickiness because moving your bank account's a pain in the neck.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there were definitely people that moved from some of the regional banks to some of the top tier banks. But we like, for example, for us, we didn't see any outflows at all.
Yeah, if anything, I would think you would see net inflow.
Oh, we did.
Where people are like, if I gotta leave here, I might as well go over here.
Sure.
I would think that it would be positive ultimately.
Sure. It was positive, but I think the top tier banks, it was very positive for them. I think the regional banks, they got hurt, but again, that's another fault of our government. You need, this is a very simple solution. You need to raise the FDIC requirements, the FDIC limits. This is not 1980 anymore. Numbers have changed. The world's different today, and there's a lot more capital out there. And and let's stop treating things like like it was whenever. I mean,
like it's 1973.
Yeah. I mean, this is not rocket science. In 1975 or whenever they put those 250, whatever it was, or 200, I don't even remember what it used to be 100. I think it used to be 100, and then they went up to 200, 250, whatever it is. But the numbers have changed. It's a different world now.
I don't know why this popped in, but I'm not going to say it. I was just thinking about the retirement age. I was having an inappropriate podcast thought about the age of our politicians and the level of disconnection. But I'm more interested in the bypass at this point, which to me it sounds like you're saying it really comes back to the beginning of this conversation, which is executive function. In other words, you could be in a very difficult space like healthcare, let's say, that's highly regulated.
Sure.
The right CEO and the right team will find a soft spot to innovate or find an edge that can find value.
Yeah.
In other words, that it's not a sector that's set up to bypass the government per se, so much as it is the prevalence of a culture. And the more that culture is prevalent, the more they will bypass.
Yeah, and listen, this isn't a problem. This problem is not just a U.S. problem. Let's be real now.
For sure.
In if we look at the rest of the globe, where there is a true democracy or a parliamentary system, whatever it is, this problem exists everywhere now because, and I just believe it's a wealth gap. I just think that I can't imagine what else it is. I just can't see it as anything else.
You're saying the reason that the competency of global management of executive function on Earth is so bad compared to the proficiency of whatever the different, the expertise domain is, that it's just a function of the fact that you're not running America's president for $50 million and then you'd have presidents around the corner.
Or do something to the effect of saying, listen, if you're a successful president as measured by certain things, whatever those things may be, or maybe don't even have to measure it. If you're, for the first, while you're president, you get, $500,000 a year, but as soon as you're done after 4 years, and without any scandal, if you didn't get arrested or something, you get $100 million. I don't care. Like, what the hell difference does it make? Let's create an incentive plan, which is essentially options on America, which is the same thing you'd get if you were a successful CEO. I don't understand the difference. And that's how we should, there's so many things that we need to reform, and there's so many things we need to change. We have a saying here, which is markets move. And just because we did something last year a certain way, why do we have to do it next year the same way? Like a different market,
Sure.
By the way,
raise the pricing of, would you pay Congress people $2 million a pop, let's say? Would you run that? Would you leave the Congress people at $100,000 and then keep the president at $50 million?
No, I think we should raise all the salaries, but then at the same time we should expect, I think we'll get a better quality person. I think there's
professional competency.
Yeah, I think in Congress there is multiple layers, and I think that it's embarrassing, as strong a nation as we are, that we have so many people that are truly below average. I mean, there's obviously some exceptional people in the Senate and in Congress and in the House, but some truly exceptional people. But there's also people that, I'm not sure they deserve to have a job, let alone be making decisions about the future of this country. And so, I think if we paid a little bit more money, we would have a different group of people running for office, for sure.
Mm-hmm. You think it's just a frustration? Do you think the frustration that you express, which is similar to the Musk frustration, or if I was talking about, I'd be frustrated at 9 out of 8 of anybody who's forced into this discussion, and which was not my ultimate intention, but ultimately approaches it with some degree of frustration. Sure. Do you think that, is there relief for that frustration to be had by other words, is that frustration, or is the dysfunction that is causing that frustration causing a problem? Like, is it creating, or is it just an emotion? Like, in other words, do you think it's an economic issue? Is it a problem beyond being an irritated old man?
Oof, that's a tough one. I don't know, but as I'm sitting here listening to this conversation and getting back to your original discussion on Elon Musk and doing an interview and talking about, randomly selecting somebody. If you look at it from Elon Musk's perspective, okay, because he's an outlier, he's a crazy outlier. From his perspective, you can totally understand where he's coming from. His perspective, because he's looking at this going, in his mind, this is such a simple solution. This is wrong. Like, what we have, this doesn't make it, he can't process it. Because it's so dumb. It's so dumb, right? It's so dumb. Like, he cannot process that we have to choose between two candidates, neither of whom is truly qualified for that role. Not even close. Not even if you picked
Not remotely, not on the best day of their best lives.
There's millions of people that are better. Okay? Millions. And that's why he can't process it. And that's why the system's broken. That's why he says that, because in the world he comes from, neither of those two people would have a job.
Which is why when the guy said, well, would you vote for Biden again? When the interviewer said, would you vote for Biden again? He just keep it very human. He just started laughing, and he said, listen, can I just pick someone from the phone book? Like, don't make me make this decision.
I told you, the only reason people vote for Biden is because Trump is a worse option. And the only reason, and that's it. That's no reason to be president of the United States.
Because you're better than Donald Trump?
Not even because you're better, just because you're not him.
Because you're not him?
Yes. I'm not even saying better. It's just, that's the only reason. I mean, that's how crazy this, and so that's why Elon Musk, sitting in an interview, can't answer the question and says, pick somebody out of a phone book, which is a completely reasonable answer for him. Now, in a real world, he would say, yeah, let's search and find someone,
$50 million star search for the American president.
Yeah.
They can show themselves. They'll reveal themselves.
Whenever. Sure.
Of course. Call it in.
Of course.
Yeah. And then, the other thing and I know we're running time a second here, but he contrasted that with the executive function in the private sector. Not so much even talking about himself, because I don't think he fashions himself a great CEO, but talking about just generally that there are great CEOs in this country. And it was shocking to him that a country that has so many good executives,
yeah, of course,
such bad executive candidates for the most important CEO job.
But doesn't that make total sense that he thinks that way? And I think you're right. And I don't think that he thinks he's a great CEO, but I think that he knows he's an incredible visionary. And he
knows what a CEO is supposed to do as a founder.
That's right, of course. And he knows that it's hard to be a CEO, and he knows that that's not what his job should be, and he gets it totally. I mean, in that sense, I'm not saying the guy's still not crazy. I'm just saying he knows that that's not his role. But listen, this is not really that hard to see. I think, I would think everybody sees this. This is the challenge we're all faced with. This is why 40% of the people vote, or whatever the number is, because it's discouraging.
My choice is Biden, Trump. What are we going to do?
Yeah, we don't know. Let's go to dinner.
Not going to vote.
Let's go to dinner.
Right.
Let
chips fall where they may.
Right. And that's no way to run the greatest country in the world. And with the biggest economy and the biggest pool of liquidity and the most opportunity for everybody, that's no way,
And that was his point. That's what not to beat the drum with him.
Yeah, fat, drunk, and stupid. We got it. It's right.
But after having sat with him and he was weird, and watching him and he was weird, and then watching, he said for 2 minutes, very normal. And it's just like, how can we have the best CEOs in the country, the best executive class or executive function of any country in the world, complexity and depth,
sure,
agility, and and self-awareness, and on and on and on. It's a cult of the executive function. And then the most important executive job in the most important country is the candidate selection process, is these two nitwits.
Yeah.
Which is the most important CEO job in the whole country full of CEOs.
But it's everywhere. You saw the whole thing. You're in Italy right now. You saw the whole thing. It happened in Italy. You got among the worst.
That's supposed to be different.
I know, but I mean, it happens everywhere. You saw it happen in the UK. You saw it happen in Italy. I mean, it happens everywhere in the world. It's just, that's what happens. There's as great as democracy is, the system is broken. The system for electing the chief, whoever gets to make the final call. Okay, that part's broken. Yeah, the CEO.
You had Trump or Biden as your country CEO.
Yeah, right. And you've got, but in the public world, that would never fly for 1 second. The board would never approve it.
It wouldn't be elected mayor of Saranac Lake.
That's right. Well, maybe Mayor Saranac Lake.
Maybe Mayor Saranac Lake, but they wouldn't be elected dog catcher or security guard.
No, not at all. All right, Mr. Radigan, that was a lot of fun. It's 1:47. We used up our full 45 minutes here.
50 million. The headline for this episode is the $50 million American presidential plan. I mean, this is, Tom, I think you really revealed something. And what fun it would be. And it's such a good deal.
Do you know how many people would turn in to watch that show?
Everybody would watch. The whole country would watch. And
here's the funniest thing. If Trump came up with that idea, he would quit his race for the presidency and he would produce that show because he'd make $1 billion. He'd make $1 billion producing that show. He'd do it in 1 second and he'd say, this is the greatest thing I've ever done.
$50 million, give me the best president, America's president.
That's right. And the greatest thing he's ever contributed to America would be to produce that show. And he'd be happy because he'd get $1 billion for the franchise and he doesn't have to deal with all the crap. And he actually would build a system that works.
We could pitch it to him and Mark Burnett.
I'm Tom Sosnoff. He's Dylan Radigan. This is Truth or Skepticism. And we do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Please join us next week. We'll see you, Dylan. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.